Young man, could you please help me?
I'm sorry, ma'am, I can't leave my seat.
Come on, driver, just go!
One day, you will know what it feels like to lose everything.
Breaking news. Billionaire Marcus Hayes has lost his entire fortune overnight.
No. That's impossible.
Marcus, someone set you up. They've taken everything.
I'm so sorry. I should have helped you that day.
I never cursed you, son,
Then why did I lose everything?
because evil people wanted your fortune.
The morning news broke like thunder over a quiet city. Every screen in every home showed the same shocking headline. Black billionaire Marcus Hayes files for bankruptcy overnight. Reporters stood outside a locked mansion gate, microphones shaking in their hands, unable to believe what they were reporting. The story spread faster than fire in dry grass, jumping from television screens to phones to whispered conversations on street corners. If this is your first here in this channel, please support me by hitting the subscribe button, like, comment and turn on your notification bell to get notified anytime a new video is posted here. Thank you. His companies had collapsed in a single week. His luxury mansion had been seized by the bank before sunrise. His private jet sat frozen on a runway, chained like a criminal waiting for trial. Even his bank accounts, once overflowing with more money than most people could count in a lifetime, had mysteriously locked shut overnight, as if some invisible hand had reached in and turned off the lights. Analysts on television called it the greatest financial collapse in modern history. They searched for answers in spreadsheets and stock charts. They found none. Experts argued on split screens, each one more confused than the last, because nothing about this collapse made any logical sense. A company that strong did not simply fall apart in 7 days. Not without help. But no one in that newsroom knew the real beginning of the story. No one knew that all of this, the fall of an empire built over 20 years, had started with something so small it seemed almost impossible to believe. It had started with a single bus ride in the rain, and the trembling words of an angry old woman standing in a crowded aisle. 3 months earlier, Marcus Hayes was untouchable. At 38 years old, he owned one of the largest transportation companies in the entire country, with buses and trains moving through more than a dozen cities. His name appeared on business magazines stacked in airport shops. His face was known in every boardroom from New York to Los Angeles. He had built his fortune from nothing, starting with one broken-down van and a dream that everyone around him had laughed at, back when he was 22 and sleeping in that same van some nights. But Marcus had a secret, one he guarded more carefully than any bank vault. Every single Friday, without telling the public, he put on a plain gray uniform, tied a company badge to his chest, and drove one of his own city buses like an ordinary worker. No fancy suit. No bodyguards. Just him, the wheel, and the people who had no idea they were sitting behind a billionaire. He believed something most rich men forgot the moment they got their first $1 million. He believed people showed their true face only when they thought no one important was watching. On the bus he was invisible. And in that invisibility he learned who was kind, who was cruel, who was honest, and who would lie straight to your face for a few extra dollars and change. Only 2 people in the entire world knew his secret. His lawyer, a sharp and loyal woman named Diane, who handled every legal detail of his double life without ever asking why. And his childhood best friend, a mechanic named Tobias, who fixed the buses late at night so no one would question why the boss kept vanishing every Friday morning like clockwork. Over the years, Marcus had quietly changed lives from behind that driver's seat. A tired single mother once found a scholarship letter waiting for her daughter, with no return address. A struggling young man once found a job offer tucked inside his backpack, signed only with initials. No one ever knew where these blessings came from. Marcus liked it that way. He did not want gratitude. He wanted to know that goodness still existed, even in small, quiet corners of the world. But this Friday would be different. This Friday the rain fell hard and cold, tapping against the bus windows like impatient fingers demanding to be let inside. The streets were slippery, slick with oil and rushing water. The morning traffic was worse than usual, cars crawling forward inch by inch. And somewhere out there, an old woman named Evelyn was about to change the direction of his entire life, though neither of them knew it yet. Marcus checked his watch as passengers climbed aboard, shaking water from their umbrellas onto the rubber mats. Dispatch had already warned him twice that morning through his earpiece, the voice sharp and impatient. Any more delays and there would be consequences, even for the boss pretending to be a regular driver. He tried to keep a calm face, but his mind felt tight, like a rope pulled from both ends. Behind him, the line of passengers kept growing longer with every stop. An old man with a folded newspaper. A teenager with headphones too loud to ignore. A woman balancing a sleeping toddler on her hip. Marcus greeted each one, scanning their faces the way he always did, searching for something honest in a world that rarely gave it freely. Then he saw her. An elderly woman, small and fragile, struggling up the steps with two heavy grocery bags pulling hard at her arms. Her gray coat was soaked completely through. Her hands trembled from the weight and the biting cold outside. She looked at the driver for just a moment, hoping quietly for even a small gesture of help. Marcus noticed. He truly did notice her, the way her knuckles had gone pale from gripping the plastic handles too tightly. But company rules were clear, printed in bold letters on every driver's manual. Drivers were forbidden from leaving their seats while passengers were boarding, no matter the circumstance. He told himself he would help her the moment everyone was seated, the moment it became safe to stand. Just a few more seconds, he thought. Just a few more people to load onto the bus. Before he could move an inch, a man near the front slammed his open hand against the metal pole and shouted that the bus was already running late enough as it was. Other passengers grumbled in agreement, their voices rising in an ugly chorus of impatience. Someone near the back yelled for the driver to simply close the doors and go, insisting they had somewhere important to be. Under that sudden pressure, worried about another harsh warning from dispatch crackling in his ear, Marcus made a decision he would regret for the rest of his life. His hand moved to the lever. The doors hissed and closed. To Evelyn, standing halfway up the steps with her bags cutting deep red lines into her fingers, it looked like the driver had simply glanced at her and chosen to ignore her completely. She did not know about the company rules. She did not know about the angry voice buzzing in his earpiece. All she saw was a young man who watched her struggle and kept driving anyway as if she did not exist. Humiliated, she pulled herself the rest of the way up alone, her knees shaking beneath her long coat, her breath coming out in short, heavy gasps. No one on that crowded bus offered a hand. No one moved their bag off the one empty seat beside them. She stood swaying in the aisle, gripping a cold metal pole with white knuckles, tears slowly building in the corners of her tired eyes. She looked up, searching for something, anything to hold on to. Her gaze found the small rearview mirror mounted above the driver's seat. And through that narrow mirror, her eyes locked directly onto Marcus, unwavering, burning with a quiet and ancient kind of pain. Slowly, she raised a trembling hand toward him, her fingers curled like a woman casting something far older than mere words. Her voice cracked at first, but every syllable that followed landed like a hammer striking glass. "Young man," she said, "one day you will know what it feels like to have everything, and to lose it all. May the wealth you treasure disappear until you learn what compassion truly means." The entire bus went completely silent, save for the rain drumming steadily against the roof. Somewhere near the back, a young passenger let out a nervous laugh, unsure if this was a joke or a warning from another world entirely. Others shifted uncomfortably in their seats, refusing to meet her burning eyes, suddenly finding great interest in their phones or the passing streets outside. Marcus said nothing at all. His hands stayed locked tightly on the wheel, his knuckles nearly as pale as hers had been moments earlier. He simply kept driving, pretending her words had not cut straight through the calm center of his chest like a blade through paper. He told himself it was nothing. An old woman's angry outburst after a hard and rainy morning. Nothing more than exhaustion talking. He promised himself he would find her later, quietly, and make things right the way he always did for strangers on this very bus. He had no idea that later would already be far, far too late. That night, Marcus slept peacefully in his enormous bed, inside walls worth more money than most people would earn across 10 entire lifetimes. He had no idea that somewhere out in the darkness, forces far more dangerous than any curse were already moving quietly against him, sharpening their knives while he dreamed. The very next morning, Marcus woke to his phone buzzing violently on the nightstand. Then buzzing again. And again without pause. He opened one eye, annoyed at first, expecting some minor issue that Diane could handle before breakfast. Instead, he found 43 missed calls glowing on the screen, each one more urgent than the last. His biggest investor, a man who had trusted him for over a decade and shaken his hand at countless dinners, had pulled out billions of dollars overnight without warning or explanation. At the very same moment, a massive cyber attack tore through his company's entire computer system, locking employees out of their accounts and freezing operations across 3 separate states within a single hour. Before Marcus could even begin to process the damage, government regulators announced a sudden and aggressive investigation into fraudulent documents supposedly hidden inside his company's financial records. Documents Marcus had never seen in his life. Documents someone else had carefully, patiently planted, waiting for exactly the right moment to strike. The news channels moved faster than the truth ever could. Within hours, reporters were already calling him a criminal on live broadcasts, long before a single piece of evidence had been reviewed by any court of law. His stock price crashed so violently that trading had to be paused twice in a single day. Banks that once begged to lend him money now demanded full repayment of massive loans immediately, no exceptions, no extensions, no mercy. Marcus fought back with every resource he had left. He called lawyers late into the night. He called old friends in high places, men who once called him brother at charity galas. He called anyone who might explain what was happening to the empire he had spent 20 long years building brick by brick, sacrifice by sacrifice. But every single call ended the exact same way. Silence. Confusion. Or worse, quiet betrayal disguised as sympathy. Within weeks, the damage became completely unstoppable, spreading like a wildfire no one could contain. Marcus lost nearly everything he owned, piece by painful piece. Friends who once filled his mansion with laughter and champagne vanished without sending a single message. Business partners who once called him a genius in front of cameras now refused to answer his calls at all, letting them ring straight to voicemail. Employees who once cheered his name in company meetings quietly resigned one after another, terrified of being associated with a falling empire that might drag their own careers down with it. Even distant relatives, people Marcus barely spoke to during the good years, suddenly appeared out of nowhere with sharp accusations, insisting he must be hiding money somewhere in secret accounts. For the very first time in his entire adult life, Marcus understood what it truly meant to be treated as worthless. Not respected. Not feared. Not admired the way he once was in every room he entered. Just worthless, invisible, easily forgotten, exactly the way Evelyn must have felt standing alone in that crowded aisle. The mansion was seized on a gray, rainy Tuesday morning. Marcus stood outside the very gates he once walked through like a king, watching strangers in uniforms carry boxes of his old life into a waiting moving truck. His private jet, the one he used to fly across the world in complete comfort and silence, sat frozen and empty on a distant runway, chained down like evidence at a crime scene no one had solved yet. With almost nothing left to his name, Marcus was forced to rent a tiny apartment on the edge of the city, the kind of place he once would have driven past without a second glance from behind tinted windows. The walls were thin enough to hear his neighbors argue. The old heater barely worked, clicking and groaning through the night. And in a twist so bitter it almost felt like a cruel joke from the universe itself, Marcus returned to driving buses full-time, not as a secret hobby anymore, but simply to survive one more week. No one recognized the former billionaire behind that driver's seat now. His face, once splashed proudly across business magazines and airport bookstores, meant absolutely nothing to the tired commuters climbing onto his bus every single morning. He was just another driver trying to make it through another long, exhausting shift, same as thousands of others across the city. But something inside Marcus had slowly begun to shift, quietly, without him even noticing at first. Every single day he saw struggling people he had never truly noticed before, back when his money shielded his eyes from the world outside tinted glass. Tired mothers counting loose coins for bus fare with shaking hands. Elderly men gripping worn canes, afraid of missing their stop in the crowd. Young workers falling asleep standing upright after brutal double shifts at the warehouse. Marcus began paying for passengers' fares out of his own small wages, wages that barely covered his rent each month. He helped elderly riders carry their groceries carefully up the steps, refusing to let anyone struggle the way Evelyn once had beneath his own careless eyes. He waited patiently for disabled passengers boarding slowly, even when impatient drivers behind him honked their horns in frustration. He started listening closely to people's stories instead of rushing them along toward the next stop. Without even realizing it, Marcus was slowly becoming the compassionate man Evelyn had once wished through tears that he would be. The curse, if that is truly what it was, seemed to be teaching him something no amount of money had ever managed to teach him in 38 years of life. Months passed in this quiet new rhythm. The city moved on from his story the way cities always forget the ones who fall from great heights. New scandals filled the headlines. New billionaires rose to take his old place at glittering galas. Marcus kept driving, kept helping, kept quietly rebuilding a version of himself that felt strangely lighter despite having almost nothing left in his bank account. Late one evening, alone in his tiny apartment, Marcus found himself staring at an old photograph from his very first van, the one he slept in his 20s. He realized, with a strange and sudden clarity, that he felt more like himself in that photograph than he had felt in years of mansions and private jets. The thought unsettled him. It also quietly comforted him. Then, on an ordinary gray afternoon, everything came full circle without warning. Marcus pulled his bus toward a familiar stop and saw an elderly woman standing alone in the biting cold, gripping the handles of heavy grocery bags with tired hands. His chest tightened instantly, painfully. He knew that gray coat. He knew that tired posture. It was Evelyn. This time there was no hesitation in him at all. Marcus parked the bus carefully, set the brake, secured every passenger safely, and stepped out into the cold without a single thought for schedules or company rules. He walked straight to her through the wind, gently took the heavy bags from her tired hands, and helped her climb the steps safely before turning back to assist every other elderly passenger waiting patiently behind her. Evelyn stared at him the entire time, studying his face carefully beneath the gray afternoon light. Something about his eyes seemed strangely familiar, though his thin frame and worn uniform looked nothing like the confident driver she remembered from that rainy morning months ago. Slowly, recognition crept across her weathered expression like sunlight breaking through clouds. "So," she said quietly, her voice barely above the wind, "you finally understand." Marcus lowered his head, unable to hold her steady gaze any longer. "I should have helped you that day," he admitted, his voice breaking slightly. "I was thinking about rules and schedules. Not about you. I'm truly deeply sorry." Evelyn's expression softened into something caught between old sadness and quiet surprise. She studied him a moment longer before speaking again, her voice gentler now than it had been that stormy morning months earlier. "I never had magical powers," she confessed softly. Marcus blinked, genuinely confused, unsure if he had heard her correctly over the wind. She explained slowly, choosing each word with careful patience. She had never truly expected any curse to actually work on anyone. She had simply wanted her painful words to haunt the conscience of a man she believed had forgotten what real kindness meant. She had wanted him to feel, even for one single moment, the quiet sting of being completely ignored by the world. But then Evelyn revealed something that made Marcus's entire body go still, right there on the sidewalk. Her late husband, she explained gently, had once mentored a retired federal judge many years ago, back when Marcus was still a boy dreaming of his very first van. After witnessing Marcus's sincere transformation over these past several months, watching quietly from a distance as he helped strangers with no reward in sight, Evelyn had shared his strange story with old friends. Friends who, despite their advanced age, still carried real and quiet influence in very powerful rooms. Those old friends had begun carefully investigating the strange, sudden collapse of Marcus Hayes. And what they eventually uncovered shocked even them, seasoned as they were. A massive conspiracy, carefully and patiently orchestrated by a jealous rival CEO, a man who had spent years smiling beside Marcus at conferences while secretly plotting his complete destruction behind closed doors. This rival had fabricated financial documents with frightening precision, bribed key executives inside Marcus's own company, and manipulated the entire market crash with cold, calculated timing, all to destroy an empire he could never manage to build on his own merit. The curse, Evelyn said softly, had never truly ruined Marcus. Greed had. Human greed, dressed up neatly in an expensive business suit, hiding behind polished boardroom smiles. Marcus stood frozen on that sidewalk, rain beginning to fall again just like it had the day everything started months earlier. Somewhere across the city, in a courtroom already being quietly prepared behind closed doors, the truth was about to surface in front of the entire watching world. And Marcus had absolutely no idea whether this new chapter would restore everything he had lost, or quietly destroy whatever fragile piece he had finally, painfully found. The trial moved faster than anyone in the city expected. Evidence poured in from every direction at once, hidden financial records, damning emails, recorded conversations that proved the rival CEO had planned the entire collapse for over a full year in advance. Reporters who once called Marcus a criminal on live television now scrambled desperately to rewrite their old headlines. The same cameras that once mocked his humiliating downfall now waited eagerly outside the courthouse for a very different kind of story to tell. Inside the crowded courtroom, Marcus sat perfectly still as prosecutors laid out the ugly truth piece by careful piece. Fabricated documents presented on large screens. Bribed executives confessing under oath, their voices trembling. A calculated attack designed from the very beginning to look like natural financial disaster to anyone watching from outside. The rival CEO, sitting stiffly at the defense table in his expensive suit, could not hide the fear creeping steadily across his face as the walls of his own careful scheme closed in around him. When the judge finally spoke, the entire courtroom seemed to hold its breath together. Marcus Hayes was cleared of every single accusation. Completely. Publicly. Undeniably, in front of every camera in the room. The rival CEO was sentenced to prison for fraud, conspiracy, and market manipulation, his own carefully built empire crumbling in the very same way he had tried so hard to destroy someone else's. Within days, Marcus's assets were fully restored, one careful piece at a time. His companies, still shaken but never truly broken beneath the surface, began to rebound steadily under new leadership he trusted completely. Reporters who had once buried his name now celebrated his miraculous comeback story, calling it one of the greatest business recoveries anyone had witnessed in a generation. But something inside Marcus had changed far too deeply to simply return to his old, familiar life. He no longer wanted the mansion, the private jet, or the crowded rooms full of people who only ever respected money above all else. He had learned something quiet and permanent in that tiny apartment, behind that ordinary driver's seat, that no amount of fortune could ever teach him twice. Marcus made a decision that shocked the entire business world overnight. He permanently changed his transportation company from the ground up, rewriting rules that had stood untouched for over a decade. Every single driver would now be trained first to assist elderly and disabled passengers, long before ever worrying about tight schedules or minor delays. The very rule that once cost Evelyn her dignity in the rain was rewritten forever, for good. The company launched a bold nationwide program called Ride with Respect, offering completely free transportation for senior citizens across every single city they served. Marcus poured his personal resources into it directly, determined with quiet fire that no elderly passenger would ever again stand alone in the freezing rain, forgotten by the very system built to serve them faithfully. He also created something deeply personal and close to his healing heart. The Evelyn Grant Foundation, dedicated entirely to helping elderly people trapped quietly in poverty, people the world too often looked straight past without a second glance or a second thought. It was his way of turning painful, humbling lessons into lasting, permanent change for others. On the day of the foundation's grand opening, cameras filled the bright room from every angle, but Marcus barely noticed them at all. His eyes were fixed steadily on one single guest of honor. Evelyn, dressed neatly in soft blue, sitting proudly in the very front row with her hands folded gently in her lap. Marcus walked forward slowly and personally handed her the very first plaque, one bearing her own name engraved in gold letters. Evelyn held the plaque carefully with both trembling hands, her eyes glistening with quiet, overwhelming emotion. She looked up at Marcus, a warm smile finally replacing the old sorrow she had carried silently for so long. "I did not curse you, son," she said gently, her voice carrying clearly through the silent room. "I simply wished that one day your heart would become richer than your wallet ever was." Marcus knelt slowly beside her chair, his voice thick with everything painful and beautiful he had learned over these past difficult months. "And losing everything," he replied softly, "was the only way I could ever discover what was truly priceless in this life." The room fell completely silent, filled only with quiet emotion no camera could ever fully capture on film. Somewhere in that silence, Marcus finally understood that his real fortune had never once been the mansion, the jet, or the endless accounts that used to define him in the eyes of the world. It had always been this simple moment. A single, true human connection between two people who had once been strangers on a rainy bus. Weeks later, on a quiet Friday morning, Marcus climbed once again into the driver's seat of an ordinary city bus. Not because he had to. Not because he needed the money anymore. But because every single Friday now reminded him gently of the rainy morning a grandmother's painful words had quietly changed the entire course of his life forever. As passengers boarded one by one, shaking rain from their coats just like that first stormy morning, Marcus watched each face carefully, patiently, wondering quietly which struggling stranger sitting before him right now might be waiting, just like Evelyn once had, for someone, anyone, to finally notice they were there.